My name is Effie, 58 years old, and I never thought my own mother would break my 12-year-old son Mason's heart. Mason lost his dad 5 years ago and struggled with confidence ever since. When Mom invited him on the family trip to Florida, his eyes lit up with hope for the first time in months. If you're watching this and have ever been betrayed by your own family, drop a comment below and subscribe to see how I finally stood up for my son when he came home in tears, dragging his suitcase behind him. I've always been the outsider in my family. After losing Thomas, my husband of 15 years, to a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, it's just been Mason and me against the world. We live in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Chicago, nothing fancy, but it's home. I work as an accountant at a small firm downtown, making just enough to keep us afloat. The hours are long, especially during tax season, but it pays the bills. Mason is my everything. He's a quiet, thoughtful boy with his father's amber eyes and curious mind. At 12, he's already showing remarkable talent in science, collecting rocks and building elaborate experiments in our tiny kitchen. But losing his father at 7 left deep wounds. He struggles to connect with other kids, preferring the company of his books and science kits. I see his pain when father-son events come around at school, or when his friends talk about weekend activities with their dads. Then there's my mother, Caroline. At 76, she's still as formidable as ever, living in her sprawling Lake Forest home that's been in our family for generations. Caroline Patterson has always been about appearances and status. When Dad died 12 years ago, she threw herself into community work and her country club social circle, carefully maintaining her image as the respected widow of a successful businessman. My younger sister Audrey, 52, has always been the golden child. She married Richard, a successful orthopedic surgeon, right out of college. They have what my mother calls the perfect family: 2 well-behaved children, Paige 13 and Noah 10. They live in a beautiful house in Winnetka, with a view of Lake Michigan, take lavish vacations twice a year, and the kids attend the same prestigious private school my mother chose for us growing up. Effie, why can't you be more like your sister? That question echoed throughout my childhood and followed me into adulthood. I wasn't as academically gifted as Audrey. I didn't marry a doctor or lawyer. I chose a career in accounting rather than the law degree my mother wanted for me. And I married Thomas, a kind-hearted high school teacher who made me laugh but didn't impress my mother. The pattern established early never changed. Holiday dinners at Caroline's house always featured subtle comparisons. Audrey's children are taking piano and tennis lessons. What activities is Mason involved in, Effie? Or, Richard just bought Audrey the most beautiful anniversary gift. Thomas certainly is, creative with his handmade presents. The constant undercurrent of judgment wore me down over the years. After Thomas died, I expected some softening from my mother, some compassion. Instead, her comments became more direct. "You really should think about moving to a better neighborhood, Effie. This isn't the environment for raising a child properly." Or, "Mason needs a male influence. Have you considered dating again? Richard has several colleagues who are divorced." I kept our contact limited, but regular, mainly for Mason's sake. I wanted him to know his grandmother and cousins, even if the relationships were complicated. Monthly dinners at Caroline's house became our routine, though I dreaded them. Mason would sit quietly at these gatherings, watching his cousins receive lavish gifts and attention while he was almost an afterthought. Paige and Noah always had the latest gadgets, designer clothes, and exciting stories about their travels. Mason would listen with wide eyes as they described Disney World summer camps and ski trips. Caroline would occasionally give Mason a book or small gift, but nothing comparable to what his cousins received. "He's just not as outgoing as the other children," I once overheard my mother telling Audrey in the kitchen. Perhaps if Effie enrolled him in better activities or moved to a better school district. The disparities were painful to witness. At Christmas, Paige and Noah would unwrap piles of expensive presents, while Mason received 1 or 2 modest gifts. On birthdays, Caroline would send elaborate gift baskets to my niece and nephew, but just a card with $20 for Mason. Last Easter, Caroline organized an egg hunt in her garden. She filled eggs with candies for all 3 children, but I noticed that while Paige and Noah's eggs also contained $10 bills and small toys, Mason's had only jelly beans. When I confronted her privately, she dismissed my concerns. "Really, Effie, you're being oversensitive as usual. The boys are different ages with different interests. Besides, you've always insisted on raising Mason your way without my input." Audrey was no better. She would parade her children's achievements in front of Mason, asking him pointed questions about his grades or why he wasn't involved in sports. When Mason won the school science fair last year, Audrey merely glanced at the photo I proudly showed at dinner and changed the subject to Noah's soccer tournament. Richard at least made more effort. He would sometimes ask Mason about his science projects or recommend books, but even his attention was sporadic, overshadowed by his focus on his own children and his deference to Caroline's obvious favoritism. I should have put a stop to it years ago. I should have protected Mason, more fiercely limited our contact with my toxic family members. But there was always that small, desperate hope that they would change, that they would eventually see what a wonderful boy Mason is, and love him as he deserves to be loved. And deep down, I still yearned for my mother's approval, still hoped that someday she would look at me with the same pride she showed when looking at Audrey. It's embarrassing to admit that at 58, I was still chasing my mother's love and acceptance. But old wounds run deep, and the child within me never stopped hoping. So we continued our visits, and I continued to make excuses when Mason asked why Grandma Caroline seemed to love his cousins more. "She's just old-fashioned," I would tell him. "She doesn't always know how to connect with boys." Or, "Grandma shows love differently to different people." But I saw how it affected him, how he would withdraw further after each family gathering, how his self-esteem seemed to diminish a little more each time. I was failing him by exposing him to their judgment and conditional love. But I didn't realize just how cruel my family could be until the Florida trip incident that finally opened my eyes. It was during one of our monthly Sunday dinners at Caroline's house that she made her announcement. We had just finished the main course roast beef that was always slightly overdone the way my mother preferred it. Mason was pushing his Brussels sprouts around his plate, trying to make it look like he'd eaten more than he had, while Paige and Noah were already enjoying their dessert chocolate mousse served in crystal dishes. "I have exciting news," Caroline said, tapping her water glass with a spoon to get everyone's attention. "I've decided to treat the family to a trip to Florida during spring break. We'll spend 3 days at Disney World and 4 days at my friend Margaret's beachfront condo in Naples." Paige and Noah erupted in cheers, while Audrey and Richard exchanged pleased looks. "That sounds wonderful, Mother," Audrey said, reaching over to squeeze Caroline's hand. "The kids have been begging to go back to Disney since our last visit." I felt Mason stiffen beside me. He had never been to Disney World, had never even been on a plane. We usually spent school breaks visiting local museums or occasionally driving to Wisconsin Dells if I could save enough. I braced myself for the inevitable disappointment, but then Caroline surprised me by turning to Mason with an unusual smile. "And Mason, I think it's high time you experience Disney World too. Every child should see it at least once." Mason's fork clattered against his plate. "Really, I get to go too?" His voice was small, disbelieving. Before I could interject about my work schedule, Caroline continued, "Effie, I know tax season keeps you busy in April, but I thought perhaps Mason could join us. I'll take care of everything, all expenses, the flights, accommodations, park tickets, everything. Consider it my treat to my grandson." I was speechless. This was unprecedented generosity from my mother, especially directed toward Mason. I felt a mixture of gratitude and suspicion. "That's very generous, Mom," I said carefully. "But it's a big responsibility to take Mason without me." Caroline waved away my concern. "Nonsense. Richard and Audrey will be there, and the children will all look after each other. Mason is 12 now, perfectly capable of a family vacation. Unless you don't trust us with him." Her tone took on that familiar edge that always made me feel like an ungrateful daughter. "Of course I trust you," I said quickly, though that wasn't entirely true. "It's just unexpected." "Effie, I'll take your son with us," Caroline declared loudly, as if making it official. "It's all arranged. We leave on April 15th and return on the 22nd. I'll handle all the details. You just need to pack his suitcase and get him to Audrey's house that morning." Mason was practically vibrating with excitement beside me. "Can I really go, Mom? Please?" Looking into his hopeful face, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. Maybe this was a turning point in Caroline's relationship with Mason. Maybe she was finally seeing what a wonderful grandson she had. "If you want to go, then yes," I told him, and his face lit up like Christmas morning. For the next 3 weeks, Disney World was all Mason talked about. He researched the parks online, making lists of the rides and attractions he most wanted to see. He read up on space exploration exhibits at Epcot, engineering facts about the roller coasters and the science behind the special effects. My science-loving boy was finding his own angle on the experience, and his enthusiasm was contagious. I took him shopping for new clothes, spending more than I should have on comfortable walking shoes, shorts, t-shirts, and a waterproof camera. We bought a new suitcase, sunscreen, and a special Disney-themed journal where he could record his observations. Each purchase stretched my budget, but Mason's excitement made it worthwhile. "Do you think I'll be tall enough for all the rides?" he asked one evening as we were folding his new clothes. "You're growing so fast, I think you'll make the height requirements for most of them," I assured him. "Do you think Paige and Noah will want to go on rides with me?" His voice betrayed his underlying anxiety about his cousins, who typically ignored him at family gatherings. "I'm sure they will," I said, though I wasn't certain at all. "And if not, you can explore with Uncle Richard or Grandma." I called Caroline several times in the days leading up to the trip to confirm details. Each time she assured me everything was taken care of. "Stop fussing, Effie," she said during our last call. "The flights are booked, the rooms are reserved, and I've purchased the park passes. Richard will pick Mason up at 7:30 sharp on Friday morning. They'll have breakfast at our house before heading to the airport for their 11 o'clock flight." "And you have Mason's information for the flight reservation?" I asked. Yes, everything's handled," she said impatiently. "I need to go now. Bridge Club is waiting." That night, I helped Mason finish packing. He carefully placed his new clothes in the suitcase, along with the journal, his camera, a few favorite books for the plane ride, and a small framed photo of the three of us, Thomas, him, and me, taken at the zoo when Mason was 6. My heart ached seeing him pack that photo, a reminder that his father should be here for milestones like his first flight, his first big vacation. "I wish you could come too, Mom," Mason said as he zipped up his suitcase. "Me too, sweetie," I said, giving him a hug. "But I'll be with you in spirit, and you can call me every night to tell me about your adventures." "I'll take lots of pictures to show you," he promised. That night, I lay awake, a nagging worry keeping sleep at bay. Something felt off about Caroline's sudden inclusion of Mason, but I pushed the feeling aside. Perhaps she was finally making an effort to treat all her grandchildren equally. Maybe this trip would be the beginning of a better relationship between them. The next morning dawned bright and clear, perfect weather for flying. I woke early to make Mason's favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with maple syrup. He ate quickly, too excited to savor the food. "Do you have your phone charger?" I asked, running through my mental checklist. "Yes, and my headphones and my medicine and sunscreen and everything else you already asked about 3 times, he said with an affectionate eye roll that reminded me so much of his father. At 7:20, we took his suitcase downstairs and waited in the lobby of our apartment building for Richard. 7:30 came and went. At 7:45, I texted Audrey but received no response. Finally, at 8 o'clock, Richard's black BMW pulled up to the curb. "Sorry we're late," Richard said curtly as he popped the trunk for Mason's suitcase. He didn't get out of the car to help. Mason gave me a tight hug. "Bye, Mom. I'll call you tonight from Disney." "Have the best time, sweetheart," I said, fighting back unexpected tears. "I love you so much." "Love you too," he said, already sliding into the back seat where Paige and Noah sat, both absorbed in their phones. I waved as the car pulled away, standing on the sidewalk until it disappeared around the corner. Back in our apartment, the silence was deafening. I busied myself with cleaning up breakfast dishes and preparing for a day of catching up on work. But as the morning wore on, I couldn't shake a growing uneasiness. I checked my phone repeatedly, expecting a text from Caroline confirming they'd reached the airport, or from Mason saying they were boarding. Nothing came. I told myself they were probably busy navigating the airport, that Mason was too excited about his first flight to remember to text. By 11:30, when I knew their flight should be taking off, I sent a text to both Caroline and Mason. "Hope you're in the air by now. Have a safe flight." No response came. By 1 o'clock, I was genuinely worried. I called Caroline's phone, then Audrey's, then Richard's. All went straight to voicemail. I even tried calling Mason, but his phone was off too. Maybe they're all turned off for the flight, I reasoned. Or perhaps they have no service. I tried to focus on work, but found myself checking flight statuses online. The flight to Orlando had departed on time at 11. They must be in the air now. At 3 o'clock, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Thinking it might be Caroline calling from a hotel phone in Orlando, I answered eagerly. "Hello, is this Effie Richards?" a woman's voice asked. "Yes, speaking." "This is Marta Ramirez from O'Hare International Airport Customer Service. I'm calling about Mason Richards." My heart stopped. "What about Mason? Is he okay? Was there a problem with the flight?" "Mason is fine, ma'am, but he's currently at our customer service desk in Terminal 3. There seems to have been an issue with his ticket. He doesn't appear to have been booked on the flight to Orlando." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What do you mean he wasn't booked?" "My mother arranged everything. The family left this morning." "Yes, ma'am." According to Mason, the rest of the family did board the flight, but there was no reservation in his name. "We've been trying to reach the other family members, but haven't been successful." My mind raced, trying to process what she was telling me. "So Mason is alone at the airport right now?" "Yes, ma'am. He's safe with us at the customer service desk, but he's understandably upset. Would you be able to come pick him up?" "I'll be there as soon as possible," I said, already grabbing my purse and keys. The drive to O'Hare was a blur of confusion and rising anger. How could there be no ticket for Mason? Caroline had specifically said she'd handled everything. Had there been a mistake with the reservation? A computer error? Or was this somehow deliberate? I parked in the short-term lot and rushed into Terminal 3, following signs to the customer service desk. And there, sitting on a plastic chair with his suitcase at his feet, was Mason. His shoulders were slumped, his face tear-stained. When he looked up and saw me, fresh tears welled in his eyes. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. I gathered him in my arms, holding him close as he began to sob against my shoulder. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now." The customer service representative, a kind-faced woman with a name tag reading Marta, approached us. "Mrs. Richards, I'm glad you made it quickly. Mason has been very brave." "What happened?" I asked, still holding my trembling son. Marta's expression was sympathetic but professional. When the family arrived at the check-in counter, there was no ticket purchased for Mason. According to what Mason told us, his grandmother claimed there must have been a mistake and said she would purchase a ticket on the spot. However, after consulting with the rest of the family privately, she returned and told Mason to wait at the customer service desk while they went to sort things out at the gate. I looked down at Mason, who had pulled away slightly but was still clinging to my hand. "Is that what happened, sweetie?" Mason nodded, wiping his eyes with his free hand. "Grandma said there was a mix-up with the computer. She said they'd fix it and come back for me. But then Paige texted me that they were boarding. I tried calling Grandma and Aunt Audrey, but no one answered. Then a different lady from the airline came and told me they had all gotten on the plane." Marta continued gently. "We attempted to contact Ms. Patterson and the other adults multiple times, but our calls went unanswered. The flight departed at 11 as scheduled with the rest of the family on board, but without Mason." I was stunned into silence, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. My mother and sister had abandoned my 12-year-old son at the airport, left him alone after promising him a dream vacation. "Mom, they said I didn't have a ticket," Mason whispered, his voice small and hurt. "I couldn't get on the plane." The deception, the cruelty of it took my breath away. This wasn't a mistake. Somehow I knew with absolute certainty that this had been the plan all along. Caroline had never intended to take Mason on this trip. The invitation had been a lie from the start. "We've documented the incident," Marta said, handing me a card. "If you need any further assistance or wish to file a formal complaint with the airline, please contact us." I thanked her mechanically, still trying to process the betrayal. Taking Mason's suitcase in one hand and holding his with my other, we walked silently out of the terminal. In the car, Mason stared out the window, his earlier tears replaced by a hollow look that broke my heart. "Why didn't they want me to go, Mom?" he finally asked as we merged onto the highway. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, unsure how to answer. "I don't know, honey, but we're going to find out." As we drove home in the afternoon traffic, I tried calling Caroline again. This time, instead of going to voicemail, my call was declined. Moments later, a text message appeared on my phone. "There seems to have been an unfortunate misunderstanding about Mason's ticket. We'll discuss when we return. Enjoying our first day at Disney now." I stared at the message in disbelief. Misunderstanding. They had left my son alone at an airport, ignored calls from both him and the airline staff, and boarded a plane without him. And now they were enjoying Disney. By the time we reached our apartment, a cold, hard anger had replaced my initial shock. Mason went straight to his room and closed the door while I stood in the living room still holding his suitcase, trying to decide what to do next. My phone pinged with another message, this one from Audrey. "Sorry about the confusion today. Mom thought she had booked Mason's ticket, but there was an error in the system. We'll make it up to him another time." I didn't bother responding. There had been no error, no confusion. My son had been deliberately excluded, cruelly led to believe he was going on a special trip, only to be abandoned at the last moment. The careful planning of it, the calculated humiliation, was breathtaking in its malice. I set Mason's suitcase down and went to check on him. He was lying on his bed, still in his travel clothes, staring at the ceiling. He didn't turn when I entered. "Would you like something to eat?" I asked gently. He shook his head. I sat on the edge of his bed. "I am so sorry this happened, Mason." "It's not your fault," he said flatly. "I should have checked the arrangements myself instead of trusting Grandma," I said. "I should have protected you better." "They never wanted me there," he said, his voice hollow. "Paige and Noah didn't even look at me in the car this morning. And when Grandma was talking to the ticket lady, she didn't seem surprised at all." I felt sick at the realization that even Mason had seen through the deception before I had. "We don't need them, you know," I said, trying to sound stronger than I felt. "We're a team, you and me." Mason finally turned to look at me, his eyes red-rimmed but dry. "Can I just be alone for a while, Mom?" "Of course," I said, standing up. "I'll be right outside if you need me." I closed his door softly and leaned against the wall, my own tears finally coming. How could my own mother and sister be so cruel to an innocent child? And how could I have been so blind, so naive to let them hurt my son this way? For the rest of the day, Mason stayed in his room, emerging only briefly for dinner, which he barely touched. I tried to engage him in conversation, suggesting alternative activities for his spring break, but he responded with shrugs and one-word answers before returning to his self-imposed isolation. I spent the evening researching my legal options, wondering if what Caroline and Audrey had done constituted child abandonment or endangerment. But without proof of intent, it would be difficult to prove they had deliberately left Mason at the airport, rather than experiencing a genuine misunderstanding as they claimed. The next morning, I knocked gently on Mason's door. When there was no answer, I opened it to find him still in bed, though his eyes were open. "Not feeling well?" I asked, concerned by his unusual lethargy. "Just tired," he mumbled. "You need to eat something, sweetie. How about some breakfast?" After some coaxing, I got him to come to the kitchen and eat a small bowl of cereal. He was just finishing when his phone chimed with a text message. The slight brightening of his expression told me he still held hope it might be his grandmother or cousins reaching out. But when he looked at the screen, his face fell. He set the phone down on the table and went back to his room without a word. Concerned, I glanced at his phone. The message was from Paige. "Just rode Space Mountain. Sorry you couldn't come. Grandma said from the beginning she didn't want you on this trip anyway. Mom and Grandma said I'm not supposed to text you but felt bad. My hands shook with rage as I read the words. From the beginning, she didn't want you. This confirmed what I had suspected. There had never been a ticket for Mason. The entire invitation had been a cruel setup designed to build up his hopes and then crush them. I tried calling Caroline again, determined to confront her, but my call went straight to voicemail. I left a terse message. I know what you did. Call me back immediately. When no return call came, I texted her. Mason saw Paige's text. I know you never planned to take him. How could you do this to your own grandson? Hours passed with no response. By evening, I was seething with a combination of fury and heartbreak for my son. I checked on Mason repeatedly throughout the day, bringing him meals he barely touched and trying to engage him in conversation. But he had retreated into himself, responding with minimal words, or not at all. That night, after Mason had finally fallen into a restless sleep, my phone rang. Caroline's name appeared on the screen. How dare you? I said without preamble when I answered. How dare you hurt my child like this? Effie, you're overreacting as usual. Caroline's voice was cool and dismissive. There was a misunderstanding with the ticketing. Stop lying, I hissed, keeping my voice low to avoid waking Mason. Paige texted Mason that you never intended to take him, that this was your plan from the beginning. There was a pause, and when Caroline spoke again, her tone had changed from dismissive to coldly defensive. Paige is a child who doesn't understand adult matters. But since you insist on having this conversation now, fine. Yes, I decided it would be better if Mason didn't join us on this trip. Even though I'd known it was true, hearing her admit it sent a shock through me. Why would you invite him only to abandon him? Do you have any idea how cruel that was? Don't be so dramatic, Effie. No one abandoned him. We simply left him in the care of airport personnel until you could pick him up. You left my 12-year-old son alone in an airport after promising him a dream vacation. Why would you do that? Why not just tell me from the start that he wasn't invited? Caroline sighed as if I were being unreasonable. Because you would have made a scene just as you're doing now. Besides, I did originally consider bringing him, but after discussing it with Audrey and Richard, we realized it wouldn't work. Wouldn't work? What does that even mean? Frankly, Effie Mason wouldn't have fit in with our vacation plans. He's not accustomed to the kinds of activities and behavior expected on a trip like this. Paige and Noah know how to conduct themselves at fine restaurants and resorts. Mason is, well, he's being raised differently. The condescension in her voice made my blood boil. You mean he's being raised by a single mother in an apartment instead of in a mansion with servants? That's exactly what I mean, Caroline said, surprising me with her bluntness. This trip is for family who share our values and lifestyle. Mason would have been uncomfortable and out of place. He's your grandson, I nearly shouted, then forced myself to lower my voice again. He's family. He's your son, Effie. And like you, he's chosen a different path from the rest of us. I was momentarily speechless at the absurdity of suggesting that my 12-year-old son had chosen a path different from his privileged cousins. Caroline continued, Besides, Mason is so withdrawn and awkward around the other children. He never participates properly in family activities. He would have ruined the trip for everyone with his sulking and odd behaviors. He's shy because you and Audrey have made him feel unwelcome his entire life, and his odd behaviors are just his natural curiosity and intelligence, which none of you has ever bothered to appreciate. There's no need to get defensive, Caroline said coldly. The point is, this trip was meant to be enjoyable for everyone. Including Mason would have made that impossible. Then why invite him at all? I demanded. Why build up his hopes just to crush them? There was a pause before Caroline answered. That was perhaps a miscalculation on my part. I thought you might have plans for him during his break, and when you didn't protest about work commitments, I realized we would actually have to take him. That's when Audrey, Richard, and I decided this alternative approach would be best. Alternative approach? I repeated incredulously. You mean lying to him and abandoning him at an airport? Again with the dramatics. Caroline sighed. He was perfectly safe, and you were contacted promptly. I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The casual cruelty, the complete lack of remorse for hurting a child, my child was staggering. You know, I said, my voice shaking with anger. I've spent my entire life making excuses for your behavior, believing that somewhere deep down you must love me and my son. But you don't, do you? You've never loved us. Love is demonstrated through actions, Effie, not empty words and sentimentality. I've always provided for you and tried to guide you toward better choices. That you've consistently rejected that guidance is your decision, not mine. In that moment, decades of emotional manipulation became crystal clear. My mother had never loved me unconditionally. Her love came with expectations, judgments, and punishment when those expectations weren't met. And now she was visiting that same conditional acceptance on my son. Listen carefully, Mother. I said the word, feeling foreign and wrong in my mouth. You will never hurt Mason again. We're done. Do not contact us when you return from your vacation. Do not send birthday or Christmas gifts. Do not expect to see us at family dinners. We are no longer part of your family. You're being ridiculous, Caroline scoffed. You'll calm down eventually and see reason. No, I won't. Not this time. You crossed a line when you deliberately hurt my child. There's no coming back from that. Fine, she said, her voice hardening. Have it your way. But remember that my financial support has helped you and Mason over the years. Without that, raising a child on your modest income will be even more challenging than it already is. The threat was clear, but it no longer held power over me. We'll manage just fine without your money. What Mason needs most is love and respect, two things you've never given him. Goodbye, Caroline. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with adrenaline. For the first time in my life, I had stood up to my mother without backing down, without accepting her excuses or manipulation. It felt terrifying and liberating all at once. Looking through Mason's phone when he was asleep had felt like an invasion of privacy, but I needed to understand the full extent of what had happened. What I found sickened me. There were earlier texts from Paige talking about the trip, revealing that Caroline had been planning this deception for weeks. Grandma says you're coming with us to Disney, but Mom says you probably won't actually go. One message read. Another stated, Mom and Grandma were talking about how to handle the ticket situation so it doesn't look bad. Then I found emails between Caroline and Audrey discussing their plan in detail. We'll tell Effie and Mason that he's included, but we won't actually purchase his ticket, Caroline had written 3 weeks earlier. At the airport, we'll act surprised about the error, promise to fix it, then leave him with customer service. They'll contact Effie, and we'll be long gone by then. Audrey's response was equally callous. Perfect plan, Mom. Richard agrees this is the best approach. We don't need Mason's odd behaviors and Effie's parenting style ruining our vacation, but this way we avoid the drama of excluding him outright. They had planned it all, calculating exactly how to hurt Mason while maintaining plausible deniability. The premeditation. The discussions among the adults made it even more cruel. And for what? Because my son was quiet and interested in science instead of sports. Because I wasn't raising him in their privileged bubble. I forwarded the emails to my own account as evidence, then deleted them from Mason's phone so he wouldn't have to see the hurtful words. Then I went to check on him, finding him sleeping fitfully, his face still showing traces of dried tears. Sitting beside his bed in the darkness, I made a promise to both of us. This was the last time Caroline, Audrey, or any of them would hurt us. We deserved better, and from now on, we would demand it. No more excuses, no more second chances, no more exposing ourselves to their toxic version of family. The next morning, Mason still refused breakfast and stayed in his room with the door closed. I respected his need for space while checking on him periodically. Around noon, I heard his voice from behind the door. Thinking he might finally want to talk, I approached only to realize he was on the phone. It's okay, Paige, I heard him say. It's not your fault. No, I'm not mad at you. Yeah, I know they're mean sometimes. My heart broke hearing him comfort his cousin when he was the one who had been hurt. That was Mason always thinking of others first, always taking the high road, even when he was in pain. When he emerged later, his eyes were less hollow, but still sad. Paige called to apologize, he said. She feels bad about what happened. That was nice of her, I said carefully. She said Grandma and Aunt Audrey told everyone not to talk to me, but she wanted to make sure I was okay. He hesitated, then added, She said they've been planning this for weeks, Mom. They never bought me a ticket. They knew all along. I took his hand. I know, sweetie. I found out last night. Why do they hate me? He asked, his voice breaking. They don't hate you, I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced of that myself. They're just very shallow people who only value certain things, and they're missing out on knowing an amazing person because they can't see past their own prejudices. Mason was quiet for a moment. I don't want to see them anymore, he finally said. Not Grandma, not Aunt Audrey, not Uncle Richard. Maybe just Paige sometimes, but not the others. I think that's a wise decision, I told him. And I support it completely. We don't need people in our lives who don't appreciate us for who we are. What about the money Grandma gives you sometimes? He asked, surprising me. I know she helps with my school fees and stuff. We'll be fine without it, I assured him, touched by his concern. I've been too dependent on her help, and it comes with too high a price. From now on, it's just you and me, buddy, our own little family. He nodded, seeming relieved. Can I have some lunch now? I'm kind of hungry. It was a small victory, but I'd take it. Coming right up. How about grilled cheese? As I made his sandwich, my phone buzzed with text messages from Audrey. Mom told me about your conversation. You're overreacting as usual. It was just a misunderstanding that got out of hand. And then, think about what you're doing before you cut off Mason from his only extended family. He needs us especially without a father. I didn't bother responding. There was nothing more to say. They had shown us who they truly were, and now we were finally believing them. After the airport incident, I fell into a night of sleepless turmoil, my mind racing with anger and plans. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Mason deserved a spring break worthy of his excitement, not this crushing disappointment. I called my best friend Diana as soon as it was a reasonable hour. Diana had been my rock since college days, the one who helped me through Thomas's death, and who had always seen through Caroline's facade. Your mother did what? Diana's voice rose in outrage when I explained what had happened. That's beyond cruel, Effie. That's psychological abuse. I know, I said, relieved to have someone validate my feelings. And I finally cut ties with her and Audrey. But now Mason's spring break is ruined, and he's devastated. Well, we can't have that, Diana said firmly. What's your financial situation like right now? Could you swing a small trip somewhere? I did a quick mental calculation. Not really. Tax season has been good for overtime, but I've already spent more than I should on all those new clothes and things for the Disney trip. And my emergency fund is pretty much depleted after the furnace needed repairs in January. What about Wisconsin Dells? Diana suggested. It's not Disney World, but the indoor water parks are fun, and it's only a few hours' drive, much cheaper than flying to Florida. The idea took root immediately. Wisconsin Dells, with its famous water parks, was a modest but fun destination we'd visited a couple of times when Mason was younger. It wasn't Disney, but it offered enough activities to fill a few days. That might actually work, I said, feeling a spark of hope for the first time since the airport disaster. I could put it on my credit card and figure out how to pay it off later. Or, Diana said, you could let me help. I have plenty of hotel points from work travel that are just sitting there. Let me book you a few nights at one of the resorts. Consider it my contribution to Operation Screw Caroline. I laughed despite myself. Diana, I couldn't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering, and I insist. That boy deserves some fun, and you deserve a break from all this drama. With Diana's generous offer, a plan began to form. I could take a few days off work, drive us to the Dells, and give Mason an alternative spring break experience. It wouldn't be Florida, but it would be ours, free from Caroline's toxicity and conditions. The next challenge was getting time off work. As I'd explained to Caroline, April was our busiest season at the accounting firm, with tax deadlines looming and clients in various states of panic. Taking even a few days off would be asking a lot. I went into my boss Frank's office first thing Monday morning, prepared to beg if necessary. Frank was a reasonable man who had been understanding when Thomas died, but business was business, and this was our critical period. "Effie, I'm a bit swamped right now," he said when I knocked on his door. "I know, and I'm sorry to add to your stress, but I need to request emergency personal time," I said. "It's about Mason." Frank's expression softened. He had met Mason at the firm's family picnic and seemed to genuinely like him. "Is he all right?" I gave him the abbreviated version of what had happened, watching his expression shift from concern to disbelief and then to anger on our behalf. "Your mother did that to a child. That's unconscionable," he said when I finished. "Yes, and now he's devastated. I want to salvage what's left of his spring break with a small trip to Wisconsin Dells. I know the timing is terrible, but—" "Take the time," Frank said, surprising me with his immediate response. "Family comes first, Effie, especially in situations like this. How many days do you need?" "3 would be ideal, but I could manage with 2 if that's all we can spare," I said, hardly believing my luck. "Take Wednesday through Friday," he said. "That gives you a 5-day break with the weekend. I'll redistribute your urgent cases among the team." "Thank you, Frank. I really appreciate it." "Just one condition," he added as I turned to leave. "Send me a photo of Mason having fun. That kid deserves some happiness after what he's been through." With time off secured and Diana's hotel points converted into a 4-night reservation at a resort with an indoor water park, I set about planning our impromptu getaway. I booked tickets for the resort's water park, plus a couple of nearby attractions, mapped our drive, and started packing our bags again, this time with a lighter heart. That evening, I sat down with Mason, who was still subdued and spending most of his time alone in his room. "I have a proposition for you," I said. "How would you feel about going to Wisconsin Dells for the rest of spring break? I've taken some time off work and we could leave tomorrow." Mason looked up from his book, surprise clear on his face. "Really? But what about your job? You said you couldn't take time off." "Some things are more important than work," I told him. "Like spending time with my favorite person in the world." A small smile, the first I'd seen in days, tugged at his lips. "We haven't been to the Dells since I was 9. "I know. I thought it might be fun to go back. The resort has an indoor water park with some new slides, and there's a science museum nearby we never visited last time." "What about Grandma and the others?" he asked, his smile fading. "Won't they be mad if we go somewhere without telling them?" "Mason?" I said gently but firmly. "We don't need to concern ourselves with what they think anymore. They've shown us who they really are, and we've decided not to keep people in our lives who don't treat us with respect. Remember?" He nodded slowly. "So we're really not going to see them again, ever?" "Not unless something drastically changes, which I don't expect to happen," I said honestly. "Are you okay with that?" He was quiet for a moment, considering. "Yeah, I think I am. It always felt bad being around them anyway, like I was doing something wrong just by being me." His insight broke my heart all over again. "You have never done anything wrong by being yourself. You're smart, kind, curious, and thoughtful. Anyone who can't see how wonderful you are doesn't deserve to be in your life." "Or yours," he added, showing wisdom beyond his years. "Or mine," I agreed. "So what do you say, Wisconsin Dells tomorrow?" "Yes," he said, and this time his smile reached his eyes. "That sounds really good, Mom." That night, as Mason slept peacefully for the first time since the airport incident, I sat at my computer and composed a lengthy email to Caroline and Audrey. I detailed exactly what I had discovered about their deception, including quotes from their emails and Paige's texts to Mason. "I want you to know that I am fully aware of the deliberate cruelty you inflicted on an innocent child," I wrote. "There was no misunderstanding or mistake. You plan to hurt my son because he doesn't fit your narrow definition of what a child should be. This was the final straw in a lifetime of conditional love and emotional manipulation." I continued. "Mason and I will no longer be attending family gatherings. We will not accept gifts, financial support, or contact of any kind. We are building a life filled with genuine love and acceptance, surrounded by people who value us for who we are, not who they want us to be. I concluded, do not attempt to contact us. Any financial transactions or support from you will be returned immediately. Mason deserves better than what you've offered him, and I'm finally strong enough to ensure he gets it. Hitting send felt like releasing a burden I'd carried my entire life. For the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval or hoping for a change of heart. I was simply stating our terms and closing the door on their toxicity. The next morning, I woke Mason early with the smell of his favorite breakfast, French toast with extra cinnamon. Rise and shine, traveler. We hit the road in an hour. He emerged from his room looking more like himself, the hollow look in his eyes replaced by cautious excitement. We ate breakfast together, planning which water slides we wanted to try first, and which exhibits at the Science Museum sounded most interesting. As we loaded our suitcases into the car, my phone chimed with a text from Caroline. You're making a terrible mistake. Mason needs his family, especially without a father figure. Reconsider before it's too late. I deleted the message without responding and turned my phone to silent. Nothing was going to spoil this trip for us. The drive to Wisconsin Dells took just under 4 hours, filled with sing-alongs to Mason's favorite songs and stops at quirky roadside attractions. It was the most animated I'd seen him since before the Disney invitation, pointing out interesting cloud formations and sharing facts about the geology of the landscapes we passed. Our resort, though not as luxurious as wherever Caroline had planned to stay in Florida, was perfect for us. Our room overlooked the indoor water park, with its colorful slides and lazy river visible through huge windows. Mason's eyes widened as we entered the lobby, taking in the rustic lodge decor and the excited children running about. This is awesome, Mom, he said as we checked in. Way better than Disney would have been anyway. I knew he was just saying that to make me feel better, but I appreciated the gesture. Well, we're going to have the best time regardless. No stress, no schedules, no one telling us what to do or how to behave. Just fun. As we settled into our room and changed into swimwear for our first venture into the water park, I noticed Mason watching me with a thoughtful expression. What's on your mind, sweetie? I asked. I was just thinking, he said slowly, that maybe it's better this way. If we had gone to Florida with them, they probably would have made me feel bad the whole time anyway. You're probably right, I admitted. And here we can do whatever we want. Spend all day on the water slides or all day in the Science Museum. Stay up late watching movies or go to bed early. It's our vacation, our rules. Our vacation, he repeated, smiling. I like that. And for the next 4 days, that's exactly what it was. We spent hours in the water park racing down slides and floating along the lazy river. We visited the Science Museum where Mason became so engrossed in the hands-on experiments that we ended up staying until closing time. We ate ice cream for dinner one night just because we could, and stayed up watching sci-fi movies another night. On our 3rd day, Mason received another text from Paige, this one with photos of her and Noah at Disney World. Wish you were here, the message read, but I noticed Mason didn't seem as affected as I'd feared. Do you wish you were there? I asked carefully when I saw him looking at the photos. He considered for a moment before shaking his head. Not really. It looks fun and all, but they're always posing for pictures instead of actually enjoying stuff. And Aunt Audrey would probably be telling me to tuck in my shirt or stop talking about science every 5 minutes. I laughed at his astute observation. You're probably right. Besides, he added, I'm having more fun here with you. Those simple words filled my heart with joy. Despite Caroline's cruel plans, despite the hurt and disappointment, Mason was resilient. And perhaps this experience, painful as it had been, had taught him something valuable about recognizing true love and respect. On our last evening, as we sat in a local restaurant enjoying burgers and milkshakes, Mason brought up something I hadn't expected. Mom, do you think we could invite Diana for Thanksgiving this year? And maybe your friend Lisa from work, since we won't be going to Grandma's house anymore? I was touched by his forward thinking, his acceptance of our new normal. That's a wonderful idea. We could start some new traditions of our own. And we don't have to have that gross green bean casserole that Aunt Audrey always makes, he added with a mischievous grin. I laughed. Definitely not. We'll only have food we actually enjoy. As we drove home the next day, Mason was quieter, but not in the withdrawn way he'd been after the airport. This was a comfortable, contented quiet, the kind that comes from being at ease with someone you trust completely. "Thank you for this trip, Mom," he said as we neared Chicago. "It was exactly what I needed." "Me too, honey," I replied, reaching over to squeeze his hand. Sometimes the best things come from the worst situations. When we arrived home, there was a large package waiting at our door. The return address showed it was from Caroline. I was tempted to refuse it or return it unopened, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was an expensive gaming system, the kind Mason had mentioned wanting months ago, but that I couldn't afford. There was a card attached in Caroline's elegant handwriting. "Mason, I hope this makes up for the misunderstanding about the trip. Looking forward to seeing you at Easter dinner. Love, Grandma." Mason read the card over my shoulder, then looked at me with determination in his young face. "I don't want it." "Are you sure?" I asked. "It's a pretty nice system." "I'm sure," he said firmly. "It's just another way for her to control us, to make us feel like we have to forgive her because she spent money." His insight made me incredibly proud. "You're absolutely right. So what should we do with it?" Mason thought for a moment. "Can we donate it to the Children's Hospital, the one Dad used to volunteer at?" Thomas had indeed spent time volunteering at a local children's hospital before his death, reading to kids and organizing game days. It was a perfect suggestion. "That's a wonderful idea," I told him. "We'll call them tomorrow." That night, as Mason slept peacefully, I received an email from Richard Audrey's husband. To my surprise, it wasn't accusatory or defensive. "Effie, I want to apologize for my part in what happened at the airport. I should have spoken up against the plan, but I didn't. I've always admired your strength as a single parent, and Mason's uniqueness. What Caroline and Audrey did was inexcusable, and while I understand why you've cut contact, I hope someday there might be a path to healing, if only for the cousins to maintain some relationship. In the meantime, please know that not everyone in this family shares Caroline's views. Respectfully, Richard." I was surprised by his candor, but still wary. Richard had been present when they abandoned Mason, had driven away, knowing a 12-year-old boy was left alone. His regret now didn't erase that choice. Still, I appreciated the olive branch, especially his concern about the cousins' relationship. Paige had shown genuine remorse and kindness toward Mason, and it seemed unfair to cut her out of his life because of the adult's actions. I responded briefly, thanking Richard for his apology, but making it clear that our boundaries with Caroline and Audrey remained firm. If Paige wishes to maintain contact with Mason, I won't discourage it as long as it's positive for both of them. But any relationship between the children will need to be managed carefully and without manipulation from Caroline or Audrey. As I sent the email, I realized how much I had changed in just a few days. The old Effie would have gratefully accepted any crumb of acknowledgement from my family, would have rushed to forgive and forget in hopes of approval. But that Effie was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who understood her worth, and more importantly, her son's worth. Over the next few weeks, our new normal began to take shape. I focused on my work, gradually paying off the credit card debt from our Wisconsin trip. Mason returned to school with renewed confidence, even joining the science club he'd previously been too shy to consider. Caroline made several attempts to contact us, escalating from texts to calls to even showing up at our apartment building one afternoon. I remained firm, returning the gaming system with a note explaining we would not accept gifts, and eventually blocking her number when the messages became manipulative and accusatory. Audrey was less persistent, but equally unapologetic, sending an email suggesting I was using Mason to punish her and Caroline for minor family disagreements. I didn't bother responding. Paige, to her credit, maintained occasional text conversations with Mason, their relationship evolving into something more genuine, without the adult's interference. They discovered shared interests in certain books and movies that had been overlooked during formal family gatherings. By summer, when Mason was accepted into a competitive science camp program with a partial scholarship, our lives had found a new rhythm. We celebrated with Diana and a few other close friends who had become our chosen family. The absence of Caroline's financial support meant tighter budgeting, but the freedom from her emotional manipulation was worth every penny. "I'm proud of you, you know," Diana told me during our celebration dinner. "Standing up to Caroline after all these years couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," I admitted. "But watching her hurt Mason made the choice clear. I should have done it years ago." "Better late than never," Diana said, raising her glass in a toast. "To new beginnings and real family." "To real family," Mason echoed, raising his soda glass with a confidence I hadn't seen before the Florida incident. And in that moment, surrounded by people who truly cared about us, who valued us for exactly who we were, I knew we had found something far more precious than any trip to Disney World could have provided. We had found our worth, our voice, and our true family, not defined by blood, but by love, respect, and acceptance. A year has passed since that fateful day when Mason came home from the airport, dragging his suitcase with tears in his eyes. So much has changed in our lives, mostly for the better, though the journey hasn't always been easy. Mason is now 13 and thriving in ways I couldn't have imagined. Last month, he won a prestigious scholarship to attend an advanced science camp at Northwestern University this summer, something that would have seemed impossible to the shy, insecure boy he was a year ago. When they called his name at the awards ceremony, his face lit up with genuine pride, not seeking approval from anyone but himself. Our financial situation stabilized after I received an unexpected promotion at work. Frank recognized my dedication during that difficult period when I was juggling work and emotional turmoil, and moved me to a position with more responsibility, but also better pay and more flexible hours. It's still not the wealth that Caroline and Audrey enjoy, but it's enough for us to live comfortably and even save a little for Mason's college fund. The healing process wasn't linear. Mason had nightmares for several months after the airport incident dreams, where he was left behind or forgotten. We worked through these together sometimes with the help of a therapist who specialized in childhood trauma. Gradually, the nightmares subsided, replaced by dreams of rocket ships and scientific discoveries. Caroline made several more attempts to re-establish contact, each more manipulative than the last. First came the gifts, which we returned unopened. Then came the guilt trips through mutual acquaintances. "Caroline is getting older, you know. Don't you think Mason should have a relationship with his grandmother before it's too late?" Finally, there were the threats-veiled suggestions that she might contest Thomas's life insurance policy that had helped us stay afloat after his death, or report me for parental alienation to child services. None of it worked. With each attempt, I became more certain of our decision to cut ties. The Caroline I had spent a lifetime trying to please didn't love me or Mason. She loved control appearances and her own narrow vision of what family should be. Audrey eventually reached out with a half-hearted apology, clearly pressured by Richard. While I regret any misunderstanding about the Florida trip, I hope we can move forward as a family. There was no acknowledgement of the deliberate cruelty, no real remorse, just an attempt to smooth things over and return to the status quo. I declined politely, but firmly. Richard, to his credit, maintained respectful distance while occasionally facilitating contact between the cousins. Paige and Mason developed a genuine friendship, texting about school projects and shared interests. Noah, too, began to connect with Mason, without the toxic influence of the adults, discovering they both enjoyed certain video games and science fiction movies. We created new traditions to replace the old ones. Thanksgiving at our apartment with Diana and a few other close friends became a relaxed affair, filled with laughter and genuine warmth, so different from the tense formal dinners at Caroline's house. Christmas was celebrated with a small tree in our living room and modest but thoughtful gifts focusing on experiences rather than expensive objects. Mason made new friends at school, his growing confidence attracting others who shared his interests. He joined a robotics club and found his tribe kids who valued his intelligence and creativity rather than judging him for not being into sports or video games. The most profound change, though, was in our relationship with each other. Without Caroline's toxic influence, without the constant undermining and comparison to Audrey's family, Mason and I grew closer than ever. Our communication became more open, more honest. We talked about Thomas more frequently, sharing memories and acknowledging our grief rather than hiding it to appear strong. One evening, as we walked home from a science exhibition at the local library, Mason surprised me with a question. "Mom, do you ever regret cutting off Grandma and Aunt Audrey?" I considered my answer carefully. I regret that they couldn't be the family we deserved. I regret that they chose their pride and control over a relationship with you. But no, I don't regret establishing boundaries that protect us from being hurt again. Mason nodded thoughtfully. I used to think there was something wrong with me, something that made them not like me as much as Paige and Noah. My heart ached at his words. There was never anything wrong with you, Mason. Never. I know that now, he said with a confidence that brought tears to my eyes. And I think I'm actually happier without them in our lives. Is that weird? Not at all, I assured him. Sometimes the hardest decisions lead to the most peace. He was quiet for a moment, then added, I'm glad you stood up for me, Mom. And for yourself, too. Me too, sweetie. It took me way too long, but better late than never, right? As we approached our apartment building, Mason spotted a poster for a community science fair next month. His eyes lit up with excitement. Can I enter, Mom? I have an idea for a project about renewable energy. Absolutely, I told him. I think you'd be amazing. That night, as I watched Mason sketching preliminary designs for his science fair project, I reflected on the journey we'd taken since that devastating day at the airport. What Caroline had intended as punishment, as a way to put us in our place, had instead freed us from the chains of seeking her approval. In losing the family we thought we needed, we discovered the strength we already possessed. In walking away from toxic relationships, we made room for healthy ones to flourish. In standing up for ourselves, we found our voices. The past year has taught me that family isn't defined by blood or obligation. It's created through love, respect, and acceptance. It's nurtured by honesty, forgiveness, and growth. And sometimes it's strengthened by knowing when to walk away from those who cannot or will not see your worth. Mason and I have built a new life, one where we don't need to shrink ourselves to fit someone else's expectations. We've surrounded ourselves with people who celebrate our quirks and support our dreams. We've learned that it's better to have a small circle of genuine connection than a large family of conditional acceptance. As I watch my son grow into a confident, kind young man, I know we made the right choice. The airport abandonment, painful as it was, became the catalyst for our liberation. Sometimes life's greatest blessings come disguised as its greatest disappointments. If you've ever had to make the difficult decision to distance yourself from toxic family members, know that you're not alone. It takes incredible courage to set boundaries and protect yourself and your children from emotional harm. But on the other side of that pain is the possibility of authentic joy, genuine connections, and the freedom to be exactly who you are. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect yourself or your child from toxic family dynamics? Share your experience in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to choose their own well-being over harmful family relationships. Thank you for listening to our journey. And remember, sometimes the family we create is more nurturing than the one we're born into.